Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. Tonight, I will be reading chapter 37, which will be presented in two parts. Wysteria, chapter 37. For the next several days, the couple spent their time together at home in Wysteria, visiting their favorite spots or exploring new ones, taking long leisurely strolls or quick skips, occasionally challenging each other to feats of body control, never mentioning Nathan nor his invading outlaws. It was a much needed and well-deserved vacation. Will had become quite comfortable with traveling. He could follow Emily into the darkness without any resistance, and he was getting better at navigating once they'd entered the world between worlds. But despite numerous attempts, both alone and with Emily, he was still unable to take that first crucial step by himself. Then, one afternoon, after another fruitless effort, Emily proposed they take a trip back to Jeremy's world, hoping he might have some advice to give them. "I'm also curious to see what he thinks about us exploring other worlds," she said. "Whether he thinks it would be safe now." Will was curious as well. They made another successful jump to Jeremy's world, once again with Will as co-pilot, landing at or near the same spot they had before, judging by the few landmarks they could see. And as before, Jeremy soon appeared and welcomed them. "How was your trip?" he asked. "Very smooth," Emily replied. "We've been practicing. Traveling with Will is effortless." "For the most part," she said, giving Will an opening to present Jeremy with their problem. "I still need Emily's help getting started," Will told him. "I see," said Jeremy. He stared at the ground for a moment, then turned and looked to his right. "Time will tell," he uttered, his eyes fixed on the far horizon. Having chosen a destination, or at least a direction, Jeremy began leading them on another hike across the barren plain. It appeared he had nothing further to say on the matter. After walking for several minutes, Emily broached the other subject they wished to discuss with him. "Do you think it would be safe for us to travel off-world, to worlds other than yours?" she asked. "There would be risks involved," Jeremy told her. "But you cannot let potential threats hold you prisoner forever." He advised them to wait a few more days, during which time he would keep an ear out for any word of trouble. "I will contact you if I believe there is any reason you should postpone your travels," he said. "Otherwise, bon voyage." Jeremy went on to remind Will that they should immediately jump back to Wysteria, directly and together, if they encountered anything suspicious, and not to fight any battles away from home. He also warned them to move through the darkness as quickly as possible, for that is where they would be the most vulnerable. They walked for nearly an hour, exchanging few words. Emily finally asked Jeremy if he was taking them someplace in particular, if there was something he wanted to show them today. "No," he said. It was just a walk. Will wondered if they might be intruding, and was about to ask, when Jeremy inquired how their body control practice was coming. Emily leapt in and explained some of the things they'd been working on. Jeremy listened, smiling as Emily described the various feats they'd performed, but his mind seemed elsewhere. There were issues Will wanted to discuss with him, things he'd been thinking about since their last visit. However, he decided to save his questions for a time when Jeremy seemed less distracted. Communicating by way of quick glances, Will and Emily decided they should leave Jeremy to his thoughts and return home. "Thank you for meeting with us," said Will. "Of course," Jeremy replied. "Always a pleasure. I think we'll be taking off now." "Taking off," said Jeremy, bringing the party to a halt. "Ah, yes, leaving. Very well." After thanking him again and promising to return, the couple joined hands and prepared to jump. But Jeremy stopped them. "Will should lead the way home," he said. "You mean guide us there?" Will asked him. "As I explained to you, I can only get into the dark when Emily pulls me." "The situation is different," Jeremy replied. "Since you are in a foreign land, and the destination is your world, you should be able to initiate the jump. It would be good for you to practice. If you were attacked in another world, your best defense would be to jump back to Wysteria." "I'll try," he said hesitantly. "But getting started—" "Just call her," Jeremy instructed him, referring to Wysteria in the feminine. "Surrender yourself to her pull." Still holding on to Emily, Will closed his eyes and did as Jeremy told him. He imagined being in his home world, standing in the square, next to the fountain. And almost immediately, he fell into the void. Then came the sensation of motion, though he seemed to be moving much faster this time. And then he saw light. "Wow," he heard Emily say. "It worked," said Will, still blurry-eyed, but recognizing his surroundings. "It certainly did," she replied. "That was the quickest trip I've ever taken. And the initial tug was so strong. That was all you, Will. I was just hanging on." "I don't have much to compare it to, but it did seem to happen fast," he remarked, his head now cleared. "For a moment, I thought the jump had failed." Then Will felt something amiss in his world. "We have company," he said. "Charlotte's here." "Did you just arrive?" Emily inquired, sounding surprised. "I don't think so. I believe she was already here." "Where?" Emily asked. "Near the castle," he answered. "Inside, I believe." Emily moved close to him and clasped his hand. "Shall we skip over there?" she said. "Sure," he replied, entwining his fingers with hers. "Let's try the top of the keep." After a quick dash through the darkness, they joined their friend, who looked happy and relieved to see them. "I was getting a little worried about you two," said Charlotte. "I couldn't find you anywhere. Were you hiding, or just late getting here?" "We were with Jeremy," Emily replied. You went to Jeremy's world, she said. Together, unaided. Yep. We've gone there twice since we've seen you, Emily told her. I had to drag Will there, but today he pulled me back. Off-world, so soon, she remarked. Impressive. We spoke with Jeremy about traveling to other worlds, said Emily. He seemed to think it was probably safe. He just suggested that we wait a few days while he did a little more probing. Have you heard any rumbles out there? Not really, said Charlotte. Some whispers about a big fight, but no talk of retribution, no calls for more mercenaries. I'd still be careful, though. Nathan may be lying low while he licks his wounds, but I'm sure he has spies out there. If he hears that you two are out and about... Don't worry, said Emily. We'll stay away from any questionable places, worlds where Nathan might have allies or interests. Do you have any particular worlds in mind? Charlotte asked. Emily told her that she'd given it some thought and had a few ideas. She then asked Will what kind of places he would like to visit. I don't know, he said. I'm just curious to see what sort of creations other people have dreamt up. I suppose I'd rather start with something pleasant. You could take him to Millie's world, said Charlotte, laughing. That's a wacky little place. True, Emily replied, chuckling as she thought about it. It might be a bit much, though. Who's Millie? Will asked. She's a young girl, said Emily. A very young girl. What would you say, Charlotte? 6 or 7? 6 at the most, I think, she answered. For Will, it was a stunning thought. A child so young creating a world. What's it like? He asked. It's hard to describe, said Emily, giggling again. It's very weird. Cute for the most part, but extremely... As Emily searched for the word, Charlotte broke in. Did you ever have a conversation with a 5-year-old? She asked him. Imagine being inside a mind that sees nothing illogical about a big fat man squeezing through a tiny chimney, or a little bunny delivering Easter baskets. I mean, come on, how would a bunny carry a basket? And where does he get all the eggs and the chocolate? At least Santa has a magic sleigh and a workshop full of elves. But if you ask a child, they'll give you an explanation. And they'll believe what they're telling you, without question, even if they're just making it all up as they go along. Although, the next day, you may get a completely different answer. With that kind of chaotic logic, it's difficult for a child to create a stable world, even if they can dream. Millie managed to do it, though. It would certainly be safe to go there. But I agree, she said, smiling at Emily. It might be a bit much to start with. Charlotte reminded Emily of several other strange worlds they'd been to together, offering to guide them if they needed her help. Then, wishing them luck with their travels, and telling them she'd continue to listen for any rumors of mischievous activity out there, she took her leave. And that concludes part 1 of the chapter, and we will return immediately with part 2.